Shalom and shalom, mighty men of valor. In case you're wondering why we love that greeting, I'm happy to indulge you. This is a greeting found in the book of Judges, but listen to what Gideon says. Gideon asked, "How can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I'm the least in my family." What a response to such a powerful greeting, mighty man of valor. But today we call out all the warriors to take up their place as we come to Adam's Cave, a space where we speak to candidly, concisely, and very clearly, just like a warrior would do. I'm your host, Kissinger Kiprotich, and it's always my joy to have you in the cave. Thank you very much again for the amazing questions on last week's conversations around divorce and remarriage by Bishop Emeritus Adoyo, and winning in relationships by Pastor Kingsley from Nigeria. Continue having those questions. We'll come back to them at some opportune time. But today, let's engage on our SMS line, 20933, or WhatsApp 0717-400-555, or just go to our Twitter hashtag, Adam's Cave, or drop a comment on Hope TV or Hope FM social media pages, and be very happy to hear from you. Now, Steven Spielberg wrote a very amazing book, Jewish Phenomena. Now, in that book, he attempts to answer a question, why have Jews risen to the top of the business and professional world in numbers staggeringly out of proportion to the percentage of American population? And we will not go into that conversation deeply, but we want to look at cultivating a winning culture, based from Jewish culture. So today we want to bring a very interesting one. We have looked for him for a while. He's a Jewish rabbi, and he comes to help us understand just a little bit about the culture and understand where half of our Bible is coming from. So allow me to invite our special rabbi, Nathaniel. He's a rabbi from Kenya. He's overseeing Kenya and East African communities. And I want to welcome you, sir. Welcome to the cave.
Asante.
Not Abraham cave like in the Bible, but This is our Adam's Cave.
So I wanted to start with saying shalom.
Yeah.
Shalom actually is one of the names of God. It says, Ani shalom v'kol asher li shalom. It's I am peace, and everything that I have is peace. So shalom is one of God's names, and it means peace, and we bless each other with peace whenever we see one another.
Ooh, powerful. Yeah. Shalom, sir.
Shalom.
I'm glad I can speak a bit of Hebrew.
Yeah, it's good.
But I didn't know it has such a powerful meaning.
Yeah.
It's a name of God meaning? There's something you said.
Yeah, it's one of God's many names.
Yes.
So it's the form that God takes when we're talking to each other of peace.
Wow. Anyway, I'm getting excited and getting overwhelmed of myself. Who is Rabbi Nathaniel? For those joining us today?
I'm from Israel. I've been in Israel my entire life, and we moved from America, but my entire life I've been in Israel. And a few years ago, we decided to come and work with the Jews from around the world. So we decided to come and move here to Kenya and work with the Jewish community here in Nairobi. And then we found that there are other communities in the area, and we were asked to work with them as well. So in Uganda, in Tanzania, and anywhere else that we were needed. And with anyone who's curious about Judaism, we like to talk and answer questions.
Wow, interesting. The first time I heard of Rabbi, I have these biblical images of the old guys with long beards.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Well, we have to start somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how did you become a rabbi?
I was working as a teacher.
Yes.
And traveling around the world. And every place that we got, we realized that, my wife and I realized that we're able to help educate and teach and approach Jews wherever they were at, and non-Jews when they had questions, and figured this was something that was worthwhile doing. Decided to go and learn in Israel in a rabbinic program, and a program that helps find these types of communities. So we studied for a few years and ended up coming out over here.
Okay, so do you go to the school to learn as a rabbi like a couple of years?
Yeah, so each program is different. This was a fairly intense program in a fairly short amount of time, because the goal is to be emissaries, to go and teach in different places. So for the community over here, or for the program that we were in, they teach, it's about 2.5 years of intense studying, 5 days a week, morning till night, and you learn everything you need to learn over there. Obviously, like this isn't the first time we're also learning. Like we're all from pretty strong backgrounds, and I've spent most of my life learning one way or another. So it's more of a push on how to lead a community and some of the practical things that maybe you did not learn beforehand.
Okay, but in terms of foundation, you are well versed when you're young.
Yeah. If you grow up in Israel religiously, you're pretty well versed to begin with. After high school, I went to learn in a yeshiva. That is it's a religious studies before you go into the army, then army, and then after you finish, you go back into the yeshiva and learn, and then after that, you go into university. So I did yeshiva for a few years, army, went back to yeshiva, then afterwards I continued, and I got my degree in psychology and education, and then went back to yeshiva afterwards to continue learning to become a rabbi.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, Rabbi, it's absolute honor to have you in the cave today.
Thank you for having me.
And I know the people watching us, or rather listening to us from radio, are really missing to look at you. I love the cap on your hair, on your head, the tiny little...
The tzitzit.
Yes.
So we have a whole bunch of different Jewish things. So we have a kippah. A kippah is a Jewish hat, okay, a kofia, that the concept of it is to remind you that there's God above you, okay? And this is a Jewish head covering that's been around since forever, different types of, different variations of it, but it's been around forever. And we have tzitzit, which is on a fabric that has four corners. You wear them to remind you of all the different commandments. We have in white, we have in blue, to remind you of the sky, remind you of God's throne. A lot of mystical and symbolic things in them together. And from that, you go into, whenever you look at them and remember that you are surrounded with commandments, you are surrounded with the honor and obligation to fulfill them. So you walk around with that as well.
Powerful.
Yeah.
What has been your journey, Rabbi, in all this time becoming a rabbi?
It's been interesting. Didn't think I was going to end up over here. Had no idea where I was going to end up. But Africa is definitely interesting, and it's warm and loving and beautiful. It's been an interesting journey, but we're still only, we don't even know if this is the beginning, the middle, the end. We have no idea what part of the journey this is. So yet to be able to say until we finish this part of the journey, what the journey is like.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can I become a rabbi?
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But it's not something you're born into, right?
No.
It's anyone could. It's just the process. The requirements of being a rabbi is being a Jew, an observant Jew, learning enough that you can lead, learning what it means to be a Jew. Takes years and years and years to actually understand what it means to be a Jew, to go through the laws. You know, the differences in our religions are sometimes very, very small, sometimes very big, depends on how you're looking at it. But we have an obligation of 613 commandments, right? As opposed to 10. Other religions that have 10 or 1 or 6, depends on how you are counting every religion and their thing. But it's not a requirement, nor is it actually a goal for the world to become Jewish, right? This is something that I feel like is important to emphasize, is when you look at the demographic of the world, we're a very small religion, right? Possibly one of the smallest religions, and yet we are one of the oldest religions, if not the oldest religion. By far, we're the oldest monotheistic religion, as all of the Christianity, Islam, even Sikhism, who comes from Islam in a way, right, are all byproducts from Judaism, right? So if you're looking at it in that way, you see that it doesn't make sense, right? Like, we should have grown much more. So in Judaism, we have priests, Levites, and Israel, right, and the rest of the nation. And there's not a goal that you can't actually switch, you can't move between them, okay? You are born, this is part of your heritage, who you're born from, right? So if you're a priest, you're a priest. If you're a Levite, you're a Levite. If you're an Israelite, you're an Israelite. And you go from that into, well, what happens when we die? In the kingdom to come, there isn't a section for priests and a section for Levites, and we all are there together. It's not about like what you were born. It's what you do with what you're born, with what you have, right? And in the kingdom to come, there's a room for everyone who does this. So that's the Jewish ideal, and therefore we actually stayed quite small because we're not pushing for conversion.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's powerful, powerful, Rabbi. There's something you mentioned about demography.
Yeah.
And I think this has puzzled many people because demographically speaking, the Jewish community is not as many people as other communities. But in terms of influence, in terms of impact, either in agriculture, either in medicine, or even military prowess.
Yeah.
I mean, we respect you guys.
Yeah.
What's the secret?
The secret. Well, it's a
Reveal it
secret.
now.
It's a secret. So we don't just spell it like this. But the way that it works is like this. There's your genetics and your wife's genetics, right? If you and your wife, when you and your wife have kids, you see the genetics from that. We have the genetics of the nation. The genetics of the nation have been revolved around the fact that we are learning in a specific way and talking in a specific way for a very, very long time, right? So actually the way you talk impacts the way you think very, very much. So for us, a lot of the conversation is around questions. Judaism is all about questions. There is almost, I would say there's virtually nothing that's off limits, okay? Depends on which circles you're in. But there's no topic that's off limits. And on our holiest night of the year, Passover night, which is we have many holy days, but as a night, it is the holiest night that we have of the year. Our focus is only about encouraging kids to ask questions. Because what do we want? We want the kids to learn how to ask. You learn how to ask a question, you're learning how to think, right? You are not judged by your answers, you're actually judged by the questions that you were able to provide, okay? So in Judaism, we have the Tanakh. The Tanakh is what you would call the Bible. Our Bible, not your Bible. So there are actually quite a lot of differences. The first half of the book, how it's set up chronologically versus hierarchy. So there are differences, and because ours is in Hebrew and yours is a translation, there's actually a lot of miscommunication due to just the fact that things are translated. So that's one thing put aside. But we have, that is called the written Torah, the written word of God. Outside of the written word, there is the oral word, right? So the oral word is what was passed on generation after generation. That's tradition. That's explaining different parts so that we actually understand what all of these things mean. And that gets put into two sets of books. One is called the Mishnah, and afterwards, talking about the Mishnah is the Gemara. The Gemara or Talmud, different people pronounce it different ways. And in the Gemara and Talmud, the whole way that it's written is like this. It's, you ask a question, I answer. Then you ask a question on my question, okay? I respond, and then you disprove what I just said. Then I disprove, you're disproving, right? And the whole conversation works on, you're not satisfied with the answer you're getting. You're going to keep on asking more and more and more until we get to either an opinion that we agree on, that this is what was said to Moses at Mount Sinai, right? And this is how we understand it. Or we have different opinions. And opinions are great, okay? Opinions actually are what help you grow. Being able to accept someone else's opinion is a very powerful thing, right? So we are working together and saying, okay, you can do it this way or this way. They are both the divine word of God, right? And it's just how we're interpreting it. So there's a lot in that. And when you spend thousands of years, okay, the Talmud, the Gemara was written 2,000 years ago. 2,000 years, you're talking just about how we're asking these questions. And this type of talk has actually been happening for at least 1,000 years before, and if not more, okay, then you have something very, very unique, which is the culture is provoking thought all the time, okay? And you see this in every field. So if you look at the demographic, you're right, like the influence from the Jewish world is enormous. We are less than 1% of the population, and yet the amount of Nobel Prizes we've had is almost 1/4 of the Nobel Prizes of the world. It doesn't make sense unless you understand that from age 5, you're teaching kids, actually even beforehand, but formally in a school system from 5 or 6, you're teaching a kid how to ask these questions. So when a kid gets to high school, or when a kid goes out into the work field, he's always trying to think of the next thing. How am I working on it? I have a problem. How do I solve it? How do I solve a problem for a problem that doesn't exist yet, right? That is the Jewish mindset. So it's stressful and unsatisfying often, okay? Because you're always trying to find the next thing, but at the same time, it provoked a type of thinking that is very, very productive and creative, so much so that you actually have groups coming from around the world to learn this. And it's an important thing, is questions, okay? Teach people how to ask questions, okay? The answers are not yes or no, ever. There's so much more depth into it. So if you want to encourage a type of thought, okay, you need to encourage people to actually ask the questions. And you see this in many cultures around the world. It's much easier to have people accept whatever you say without asking questions, right? So every time that there's a question in Judaism, almost always the answer is not an answer, but another question.
Another question. No, it's interesting because I remember in school we used to be told, don't answer a question with another question. And now you're a rabbi saying, answer a question with a question.
It's very important. It's very, very important.
Let me ask you, Rabbi.
Yeah.
You've talked about asking questions. And I think there are 2 questions arising from that. Mm-hmm. That means there must be a person asking questions, and there must be a person answering questions. So I know you're speaking to the men. So are you challenging men to be available to their children to be able to answer those questions?
100%. 100%. I think that in Judaism, it's very much seen in that way. It's called V'higadeta lebincha. It's and you should tell your children. And if your children don't know how to ask, make them ask. Teach them how to ask, right? You need to have an interaction with your kids if you want them to grow up as thinkers, and you want to actually better your society, your family, right? It starts with you, and then your family, your society, your community, in every single way. But if you look at the society and the fact that what are parents' interactions with their kids, right? It is extremely important. It's extremely important. I encourage everybody from every culture in the world to do this, okay? But over here, you also see it, that a lot of times the kids are starting. I interact with different groups throughout Kenya. So I've talked with schools, I've talked with teachers, I've talked with parents at different occasions, and you see that the kids are starting to have questions, and a lot of times the parents don't have the answers yet. And this is something that's actually, like, as parents, it's very embarrassing, right? If you don't have the answer, what do you want to do? You want to tell your kid to shut up and move on because you don't want to be embarrassed in front of your children, because you never want to be embarrassed in front of your children. So what do? You either make an excuse of why you can't answer the question, or you tell your kids to go away, right? But that's not productive. The productive thing is, I don't know. Let's check it together, right? That's a great question, right? Let's think about it together. Why do you think, right? As opposed to making up an answer, okay? Or rejecting the kid's question altogether, right? But if you tell the kid, I don't know, it's something that's very, very hard, especially for men. Okay, we have pride. Women don't have pride. Men have pride. Okay, that's an important thing to know. Is men have an ego, a pride, and when that's hurt, it destroys us, right? So what do men do? We avoid having anything that will hurt our pride ever. So what do? We just reject them, right? The kid asks a question, go ask your mother, right? Right? Like, don't bother me with that. But instead, you give the kid quality time. Your kid will grow more, and you'll grow more as a person. You'll know more. You'll know more because the kids are asking the questions that you forgot to ask even. You're forgetting to ask questions because we're older. We don't want to ask the questions anymore. We have our jobs, we have work, we have our life, we have our routine, and we don't have time to think as much. Kids do. And kids are asking questions, and especially, it's very sad for me, but you look at the school systems over here, and a lot of schools, like what you said, are encouraging kids not to ask questions, okay? Because they want to give them as much information as possible, and asking questions is embarrassing for the teachers, or it gets them off track, or whatever it is. And then the kids don't end up actually learning. When I was a teacher, my goal, I would set up my class of whatever I was going to teach. But if there was a more important question that was asked by a kid, I would go with them completely. So as far as what the school's concerned, the school needs to show that the kids are prepared for a test or something like that. But as far as the parents or the kids, or actually a lot of times the teachers, a lot of them were much, much happier with that type of learning. We were learning outside about nature, right? God's creations, you're taking them around, showing them about plants. And then I'm looking around and I bend down and a kid shows me, he's like, look, what is this? And I say, this is a fossil. I say, we don't need to talk about anything else today, right? Let's talk about fossils, right? And the kids loved it. 4 years later, a kid showed up to me, he says, I was on a hike with my family and look, I found fossils, because I taught them how to find fossils and what fossils are, and the kids know about it now, right? That's what kids remember. The kids remember the questions that you answer. That's what stays with them. I think it's very, very important for parents, especially for fathers, okay, and to make sure that they have time, make time to talk with your kids, to answer their questions. And if your kids don't know how to ask questions because they're too young and they're not there yet, or they're too old and you feel like you missed your opportunity, encourage them. Give them the first question. Provoke it. Provoke the thought. It's very healthy and it can make all the difference for the next generation and for this one.
Wow. Rabbi, thank you. I want to ask questions today.
Yes.
I hope I'm learning now to ask questions.
Good, good. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So I observed that the Jewish community is a bit kind of close community. You have a very strong bonding in terms of family, bonding in terms of relations. Is it something that is deliberate, or is it something that just came up and said, no, we are special people. We are God-chosen people. That's what we call you guys, God-chosen people. We are blessed of God. We are different people, and we want to be different.
You want a strong core in your relationships, in your families, in your community. It starts from home, right? First of all, loyalty to your wife, right? This is something that I've seen very often in Africa, is people differentiate between sex and their marriage, okay? Right? And that is actually very unhealthy. Sex is the holiest thing that you can possibly think of. Okay? It's the potential of creating life. There's nothing more godlike than that, right? And people are making it cheap. It's like eating or drinking, okay? But when you think about it and say, well, if I am only intimate with my wife, or a wife is only intimate with her husband, okay, and you have rules that go with it, okay? It's not at any time of the month when a woman has her period, you're not together, okay? Even afterwards, she has to go to a pure body of water, it's called a mikveh, and purify herself, okay? Afterwards, you come back and you have it's like a honeymoon, right? Like you come back and you were waiting for the wedding, and you come back after you haven't been together for a week and a half, and you are together. You're in the same house, but you're not sleeping together, right? And then you're together, and that elevates you as a couple, and that builds up a relationship, okay? So you work on that with your wife, okay? You have at the same time how you're raising your children. The Jewish structure is very, very confining, which means it's actually really hard to be a Jew in East Africa. I'm one of a handful of religious Jews that live in East Africa, because most people that came here aren't religious to begin with, right? So we're here, we work with them, each one on their own level, but for the most part, in East Africa, it's really hard because you need a tight community to actually have an observant life. If you have a tight community, so I grew up in a very tight community in Israel. It starts out with you wake up in the morning, you have your morning routine that there's a whole bunch of things we can discuss over there, just, basic things that we do as Jews in the morning. And then you go to the synagogue to pray every single morning, okay? You're in a good community, there's several options of when you can come for services, okay? It's without a sermon, everybody is coming, we are praying together. We have someone who leads the services, but he leads, he faces the ark with us. It's not like a preacher who stands up in front of everyone, no. Right? So we're all praying together. And you'll have several options of that in the morning, and you have to finish praying by 3 hours from sunrise, so 9 o'clock, okay? So you have to wake up in the morning, And you can't sleep until noon, right? You need to be responsible. So you wake up, you do that. Then after you're ready up, you have breakfast. You start your day with blessings on the food, right? You go to work. In the middle of your workday, you stop for the afternoon prayer. So you have to make sure that you are in an area that has that as an option. Afternoon prayer. That is again with a minyan, with a group of Jews. Then afterwards, nighttime, before you go to sleep, another prayer with a group. You go again a third time to the synagogue, 3 times a day with a group of Jews, right? It's very hard to do that if people aren't observant or people live far away. So you need to be in a close community. Okay, great. So you're in a close community. Then what? You have very strict rules. And that's the perception is if you are keeping the Hayam Machanecha Kadosh and keep your camps holy, that's actually one of the things you mentioned, the warriors of beforehand. So the warriors, one of the things if you want to be successful in battle, the Torah says, keep your battle camp pure, keep it clean, kadosh being holy, right? Like make sure it's holy. How do you make sure that your battle camp or your house or your community is holy? Okay, you have strong family values. Okay, you can only do that if you have a good, healthy relationship, a husband and wife, right? You have a good relationship, husband and wife. You have a good relationship, you have the potential at least to start a good relationship with your kids. You have a good relationship with your kids, they'll have a good relationship with the neighbors, right? You create that, and so many of the commandments actually have to do with social commandments, are bringing things one to another, charity, and in that concept, a lot of our holidays revolve around being with other Jews. You can't do it by yourself. It's very, very hard. The Jewish community is not closed in everything, okay? Most of the Jewish community does business with the rest of the world, right? Explore the world, travel, see what it is, but it is by God's design that you need to live in a community. You need to be with other Jews, and everything else that's written in the Torah about your relationships and understanding your relationship with your wife, your neighbors, your children, your God, non-Jews, colleagues, everything, right? Like you're not, to an extent that people don't even understand this, but we have something called yichud. Yichud means being by yourself with another woman. You are not allowed to be in your office with a woman with a door closed,
No.
okay? Don't do it, right? You don't do it. No one ever talks about maybe you're having an affair, maybe you're not. No. It's done, right? Whenever a woman wants to come talk to me, I either say, let's sit outside. And if it is a private matter and she doesn't want to sit outside, then I will say, okay, if we're sitting in my office, the door stays open, okay? And if she's okay with it, then my wife will sit in the conversation also, right? Make sure that no one ever your wife should never doubt, no one should ever think that you are having an affair, right? You do that, your relationship with your wife is a lot stronger. And then the community is stronger, the nation is stronger.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So, question of like divorce, is it a common thing in a tight community like that with such a very strong underlying foundation?
It happens. Statistically, it's less if you are more religious for 2 reasons. The ones that are, if you go to like the ultra-Orthodox, so it's less common because it's also less accepted, right? Like there's a social expectation that you will work through it even if things are hard, and there's pros and cons to that. In the religious world, there is divorce, but also a lot less than the secular world or the non-Jewish world, where things are, like now in the West, people change spouses like they change shoes, right? Like it's every other day you change a spouse. So what's the expectation of actually making things last?
Yeah.
People are also taught that, this is going to bring us to masculinity and things like that. But when you look at what's going on in the Western world, where men are not allowed to be men anymore, and women are becoming more masculine, so men are becoming more feminine. What chance do relationships like that have to last? So those go way down. In religious worlds where you've got these core values that actually are traditional, and they stay very well, there are less divorces. You have good, strong values, it usually works, but there are still divorces. It does happen.
Just happened. But
Yeah.
amazing, amazing. Thank you for sharing, for giving us a secret. Now we're almost getting to understand
Okay, good.
why you are winning, why you're winning. And part of the winning culture, you've talked about spending time together as a family, encouraging our children to ask questions, creating a culture where people continue forever ask questions. Let me ask you one more in terms of the environment that people do business, for example. Do they learn to do business? Is it something that is taught, or is it just part of the questioning as well?
Some of both. Okay, like those who get into business tend to go and learn it, just like anyone else who would want to get into business. But there has always been a lot of business inside Jewish communities between people.
Okay.
So it's something that people are fairly familiar with. Some more, some less. It depends on the community, depends on the person and personality. But mostly learned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Time is running out,
Okay.
and I have so many questions to ask. I think I'm beginning to learn how to ask questions.
Good. We'll do it more.
We'll do more. But I would want to ask you if you have any parting shot that you want to speak to men, something that I can learn about your culture that can help us as men to really improve and get better in our community.
I would say like this. There was a rabbi named the Ramchal, okay, a few generations back. And he says when you get up to heaven, you are asked about, there's a lot of things that you're asked according to Jewish tradition when you get up to the next world and you are standing in front of judgment, or in front of God for judgment. And the things that you're asked, they are being asked, vary by different opinions in Jewish belief. The Ramchal says that one of the questions that we are asked, and this is the question that you are actually being asked, is, did you do charity? Okay? And what does that mean is you have your different personas, okay? You are a father, a husband, a pastor, a friend, a neighbor, right? How you dealt with Jews, non-Jews, what your relationship was with God. And the question of did you do charity is, were people happy with you? Okay? And this is something that's a bit hard to grasp because you need to leave your mindset and think from other people's mindset and saying, did I make my wife happy? If you make your wife happy, she'll make you happy. If you and your wife are making each other happy, your kids almost by definition will be happy, right? Like this is something that I can't stress enough, is you want to have good, healthy kids, okay? Have a healthy relationship with your wife. A man is only a man in comparison to his wife. We have the story of Adam and Eve, okay? Adam and Eve, we can talk about that for 4 hours straight without stopping to take a breath and just scratch the surface. But Adam is looking for an ezer kenegdo, which means a helper that opposes him in a way. So what does that mean? That means a man cannot be complete without a woman. Cannot. Okay? You are half a man, half a soul. You can't do it. Why can't you do it? Because there's no one to challenge you. So we talked about the challenging partnership that you can have with a friend, right? But why is it not, why does a man need a woman? It would make a lot more sense for a man to be with a man. Why? We get along better. We have similar things that we enjoy doing. We have similar hobbies. We have similar thoughts. We understand we're very much like we think of something, we say what's on our mind. When women have more of that emotional side and not necessarily saying exactly what they're thinking, or they say one thing and mean another thing, and that's harder for men to understand, right? We are very, very different creatures. But when Adam is looking for a partner, okay, God creates woman for him. He creates a wife, okay? So what does that mean? Says in ezer kenegdo, someone to help him and oppose him at the same time, there's a law in physics. If I throw a punch, okay, it will go as straight as I possibly could, but if you look at it in slow motion, you see it moves a bit. It's not exactly straight, okay? However, if I put something to oppose it and in a way guide it, it's a lot straighter. And the reason is if you are working together, there's nothing better than that. The Jewish ideal is the entire blessing from your work, from everything that you will do, comes from your wife, okay? You need to make sure that you make your wife happy. You need to make sure that your wife is that your wife is fulfilled, okay? In every aspect. You do that, you get to be a real man.
Thank you, Rabbi. We'll allow you to say a prayer in Hebrew.
The blessing that I always give is the same blessing that was given by Aaron HaKohen, Aaron, the brother of Moshe, right? His blessing that he's giving, right? That he gives to the nation, okay? And I think that should be our job to the world, is to bless with the same blessing, okay? Is may God bless you and nurture you. May God protect you, okay? And oversee what you are doing, okay? And may God give you peace, Amen. Okay? And we say this when we have a priest in our like a kohen, right? Our priest in the synagogue. So he gets up and he gives a blessing to the nation, and it says he says a special prayer before that, okay? And it says that God commanded us to give this blessing with love, okay? It says you can only give it if it's coming from love, right? So the goal is that we work together and that we spread information, that we spread love, that we spread peace around the world, and that is the Jewish ideal, is to spread this peace and love around the world in a way that everybody can come together and rally behind one God, and with that end all of the wars. So the blessing is, Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
God willing.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Rabbi. Time do not allow us. And thank you, Adam and Eve, for being part of this conversation. We've been speaking to Rabbi, responsible for Kenya and East African community, and even across that part of Africa. Amazing insight on how you can win a winning culture, learning from them. So continue with the conversation on our 20933 or 0717 400 555, or just go to our YouTube pages and drop in a comment, and we'll be very, very delighted to hear from you. We'll be sure to bring Rabbi back again, because we have not even concluded how to do the winning culture. But look forward to seeing you again and wishing you a beautiful week, and God bless you.